The love of my life wants to divorce me. On the first night of our honeymoon. A disaster, right? Okay, maybe I should have seen it coming. Daniel Prescott and I had only been together 6 months before we got married. 6 months. Who does that? But he was handsome, dependable, and could actually cook a steak without burning it, which in my book is basically husband material. Our wedding was small, rushed, but it felt right. Friends and family muttered about moving too fast, but I tuned them out. I believed in us. I believed that love didn't have to follow a timeline. Then real life started. In the month since, we've gone from newlyweds to roommates who happen to share a bed. He wants structure. I want spontaneity. He talks about 5-year financial plans. I talk about which rom-com we should stream. Somewhere in there, we forgot how to meet in the middle. So when we finally made it to our honeymoon, a snow-dusted Airbnb cabin straight out of a Hallmark movie, I thought we'd hit the reset button. Fireplace, champagne, no distractions. Just us. But across the dinner table, Daniel looked like he was calculating mortgage rates instead of enjoying wine with his husband. I smiled nervously, trying to thaw the ice. So, Mr. Responsible, are you going to let yourself enjoy at least one night of our honeymoon? His jaw tightened, and that's when I realized the snow outside wasn't the only cold thing in the room. It hadn't started like this. For a little while, I convinced myself it was fine. The champagne fizzed, the fire popped, and Daniel even unbuttoned the top of his shirt. A wild move for him. I curled into his side, kissing his neck, whispering, "See? Honeymoon vibes. No work, no bills, just us." He gave a small smirk. "You act like I'm incapable of fun." "Because you are," I grinned, "but I love you anyway." It felt good, normal. For 10 minutes, I believed in us again, and then he ruined it. "You know," Daniel began, voice slipping back into serious mode, "we really need to discuss your spending. Take out 4 nights a week? That's not sustainable. And Ethan, I can't be the only one thinking about the future here." I pulled back, blinking. "Seriously? Right now? I'm literally in your lap, and you want to talk budgets?" "This is exactly the problem," he said sharply. "You treat everything like a joke. Do you even care about where this marriage is going?" The words sliced deeper than he probably meant. "And you treat everything like a business contract. God forbid we actually enjoy each other without a lecture." The argument escalated fast. All the unspoken frustrations of the last month spilled out. His clipped tone, my defensive snaps. Until finally, Daniel blurted the words that stopped me cold. "I want a divorce." The fire crackled. My chest hollowed. "Fine," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Honeymoon's canceled. Tomorrow we're out of here." We slept in separate rooms, the walls between us heavier than the snow outside. Except in the morning, the snow had swallowed the world whole. Roads blocked, power flickering. The lone staff member shrugged helplessly. We weren't leaving. Not today, not for a week. Stuck with my almost ex-husband. Just my luck. Day 1 of the disaster honeymoon. If silence could kill, Daniel and I would both be 6 feet under by now. He'd claimed the armchair by the fireplace with a book so thick it looked like a weapon. Meanwhile, I sulked in the bedroom, scrolling through my phone on the one corner of the bed where the Wi-Fi signal barely cooperated. The cabin wasn't exactly big, which meant hiding from my husband, ex-husband-to-be, was basically impossible. Around noon, my stomach growled loud enough to echo. I ventured out to the kitchen, only to find Daniel already there, standing like he was starring in a How to Be Civilized commercial. "Morning," I said flatly. "Afternoon," he corrected without looking up. Strike 1. I grabbed the kettle, desperate for hot cocoa. The cupboard revealed exactly 1 packet left. Of course. I reached for it, but Daniel's hand shot out at the same time. We froze, fingers brushing, glaring at each other over a sad little paper packet of chocolate powder. "Seriously?" I hissed. "I was here first," he replied coolly. "I was hungrier," I shot back. "It doesn't work that way, Ethan." "Fine," I snapped, ripping the packet in half. "You take the powder, I'll just lick the marshmallows. Happy?" His jaw ticked, but to my surprise, the corner of his mouth twitched like he was fighting a smile. He shoved his half at me. "Take it." "I don't want cocoa that bad." "Wow," I muttered. Chivalry isn't dead. The rest of the day was a series of unfortunate collisions. I bumped into him in the narrow hall. He took over the only good chair near the Wi-Fi router. I tried to read by the fire, only for him to start sighing dramatically with every page I turned. By the time night fell, we hadn't had a real conversation. Just a running tally of sarcastic one-liners and dirty looks. Day 1 down. 6 more to go. If the snow didn't kill us, the marriage might. Day 2 of the disaster honeymoon. The faucet coughed, sputtered, and then gave up entirely. Perfect. Just perfect. Daniel's face, usually calm and collected, tightened into that "I knew this would happen" expression. "No water," he muttered, tapping the counter like it might magically summon some. "I can see that," I said, grinning despite myself. "So, do we die of thirst or—" Daniel groaned. "We'll have to melt snow. Boil it." It's the only way, I shrugged. "All right, fine." Led the way, Captain Responsible. But as I stepped outside with the pot, shivering, I realized I wasn't going to sit around letting Daniel do all the work. Snow scooped, pot on the stove. I started stirring, figuring out the rhythm. Surprisingly, it wasn't as bad as I expected. The snow melted quickly, and I even managed to keep the fire at the right temperature. Daniel watched, arms crossed, his brow furrowed. But not in irritation. More impressed. "Huh, didn't think you'd handle this without whining," I smirked. "I told you I'm full of surprises." By evening, the cabin was stocked with jars of hot water, and the tension had eased a little. Sitting by the fireplace, I finally let myself relax. Daniel cleared his throat. "Thanks. For helping." I didn't think this would go so smoothly. I shrugged, leaning back against the couch. "Hey, I'm not completely useless." He hesitated, then a faint smile softened his features. "Reminds me of that night we got lost hiking last summer." I laughed. "Oh yeah, you were ready to turn back, and I somehow convinced you to follow the stream. And we ended up finding that hidden waterfall." "You handled it better than I expected," Daniel admitted. I was impressed. "I was panicking," I teased, grinning. "You still made it work," he said quietly. We shared a moment of quiet, the fire crackling between us. And for the first time in days, I didn't feel like we were two strangers stuck under the same roof. There was history, warmth, and maybe, just maybe, the tiniest crack in the wall between us. Day 3 of Disaster Honeymoon. By the time evening rolled around, the snow outside had turned from an annoyance into a full-on blockade, and the only food we had left was whatever survived the boil or fry challenge. Daniel and I were forced to cook dinner together. "You handle the chopping. I'll manage the pan," he said, handing me a knife like I was some kind of apprentice. I rolled my eyes. "You mean like the last time I almost sliced your thumb off?" "Exactly like last time," he muttered, though the corner of his mouth twitched, betraying the faintest grin. We started cooking. And somehow, it felt like old times. I flicked a carrot peel at him, narrowly missing his shoulder, and he shot me a glare that barely hid a laugh. He poked me in retaliation, and I squealed, pretending to stumble back, bumping into the counter. "You're lucky the snowstorm didn't cancel your sense of humor," he said, shaking his head, though his tone was softer than it had been in days. As we moved around the tiny kitchen, scraping, stirring, tasting, I felt the rhythm of us again. It was silly, chaotic, but comforting. The way we fit together when neither of us was pretending. At one point, our hands brushed while reaching for the same spoon. Heat flared in my chest. I leaned a little closer. Daniel's eyes flicked up at me, wide, sharp, and almost soft. Almost. I almost kissed him, but he pulled back, sighing, stepping away like a wall had gone up again. "Ethan," he muttered, voice tight. "I only asked for a divorce because I'm scared." I froze. "Scared of what?" "Of how different we are," he admitted, fiddling with the edge of a pot. I don't know. I thought it would never work. And instead of facing it, I panicked. I crossed my arms, trying to hide my softening heart. "Daniel, different doesn't mean broken." He looked at me then, really looked. And for a moment, I saw vulnerability behind the carefully constructed armor. My lips quirked into a smile. "We can figure this out. We've handled worse. Remember the flat tire incident?" A small laugh escaped him, shaking his head. "I guess we have." Dinner finished, and we ended up sitting cross-legged on the floor, plates in our laps, sharing bites and teasing each other about who ruined whose portion. I caught him staring at me once, just for a second, and my chest fluttered. The walls weren't gone, not yet. But for the first time since the divorce bombshell, they felt a little crumbly. And maybe, just maybe, I thought we weren't done yet. Day 4 of Disaster Honeymoon. By day 4, the snowstorm outside had become almost a character in its own right. Cold, relentless, inescapable. Inside, the cabin was quiet, almost deceptively so, the kind of quiet that makes every unspoken thought echo. Daniel was pacing near the fireplace, fingers drumming on the mantle like he was trying to solve a puzzle that wasn't meant to be solved. I sat on the couch, arms crossed, watching him carefully. I knew that look, the "I'm about to explode" look. I don't get it, Ethan," he said finally, voice tight. "Sometimes I feel like you're reckless. Like you don't take any of this seriously. Marriage, life, responsibilities. You float through it all, and I end up cleaning up after the fallout." I blinked at him, a flare of hurt and frustration rising. "Reckless? You think I don't take this seriously? You're the one who treats marriage like a contract. Every little thing is a rule or a checklist. When do I get to breathe? To actually enjoy being married to you?" His jaw clenched. "And you think I'm controlling? Joyless? Maybe I am. But I can't stand watching you drift through life like nothing matters. I need certainty." The words had barely left his mouth when the frustration that had been building in me for 4 days, weeks really, spilled over. "I don't even know why you married me if all you see are flaws," I shouted. For a heartbeat, Daniel froze. Then, his own voice boomed in reply, raw and vulnerable. "Because I love you so much it terrifies me." The room went still. The fire crackled, but the warmth didn't reach us. I stared at him, chest heaving, mind spinning. I wanted to scream more, to throw every argument at him, but the intensity of his words stole my breath. He sank into the armchair, burying his face in his hands. I retreated to the corner of the room, feeling a mix of relief and heartbreak. Words weren't coming. The tension pressed down on us like the weight of the snow outside. Neither of us spoke for what felt like hours. Only the occasional creak of the floorboards or the soft hiss of the fire reminded us we weren't completely frozen in place. By the time the quiet became unbearable, we both retreated further, each to our own space in the cabin, shaken, raw, unsure of what to do next. But somewhere beneath the anger, under the hurt and the frustration, there was a flicker. A flicker that neither of us wanted to admit yet. That despite everything, we weren't done with each other. The snow kept falling. The walls between us were thicker than ever. But even in that silence, I knew the storm wasn't just outside anymore. Day 5 of a not-so-disastrous honeymoon. The storm came hard that night. Howling winds rattled the windows, and then darkness, The hum of the heater, the soft buzz of lights, even the faint whir of the fridge, all gone. The cabin plunged into silence, broken only by the fire sputtering weakly in the hearth. "Power's out," Daniel said, his voice flat, but I could hear the worry tucked inside it. I pulled the blanket tighter around my shoulders. "Guess it's just you, me, and Mr. Fireplace now." He gave me a look that should have been annoyed, but his lips curved, just a little. With no heat, the temperature dropped quickly. Shivering, I dragged another blanket from the couch and plopped down right in front of the fire. Daniel hesitated, then sank beside me, stiff at first. We sat in silence for a long while, wrapped in layers of wool and awkwardness, until I leaned against him without thinking. He didn't move away. Instead, he sighed and pulled the blanket tighter around both of us. "Ethan." His voice was quieter now, almost lost under the crackle of flames. "I owe you the truth. I grew up in a house where love meant survival. My parents worked nonstop. Bills, chores, schedules, everything was duty. So when I think about marriage, I think about responsibility, stability. Hey, if I sound controlling, it's because I'm afraid. Afraid if I don't keep everything in order, I'll lose it." I blinked at him, heart twisting. "Daniel." My throat tightened, but I pushed through. "You want to know my fear? It's that I'm never enough, or sometimes too much. I've been told my whole life I'm either too loud, too dramatic, too silly, or not serious enough, not focused enough, not worthy. And when you asked for a divorce, it felt like proof." Daniel's hand found mine under the blanket, tentative but warm. His eyes glistened in the firelight. "I'm sorry, Ethan. I was scared. And instead of trusting you, I lashed out. You don't deserve that," I sniffed, wiping at my cheek, realizing I was crying. "I'm sorry too. For making jokes when you needed seriousness. For not listening when you needed me to." We sat there, clutching each other's hands, tears slipping quietly. For the first time, the silence didn't feel like a wall. It felt like space. Space to breathe, to be honest. Daniel pulled me against his chest, pressing his forehead to mine. "Maybe we don't need to be perfect husbands right now," he whispered. "Maybe we just learn." Together, I laughed wetly. "So what you're saying is honeymoon reboot?" His smile cracked through the tears, and he kissed my temple. Honeymoon reboot. The storm outside raged on, but for the first time since we'd arrived, I felt warm. Day 6 of our honeymoon. Honeymoon 2.0. When I woke up the next morning, Daniel was still beside me. His arm draped lazily across my waist, his breath warm against my neck. For a moment, I didn't move. Didn't dare. It felt safe. The kind of safe I'd been craving since the night everything went sideways. Eventually, he stirred, eyes half open. "Morning," I grinned. "So, are we officially canceling Disaster Honeymoon and rebooting as Honeymoon 2.0? He chuckled softly, the sound rumbling against my shoulder. "You're ridiculous. And yet you're smiling." By mutual unspoken agreement, Day 6 became our do-over honeymoon. The first order of business, board games we found stashed in a dusty closet. Daniel insisted on reading every rule in painful detail, while I tried to sneak pieces when he wasn't looking. "Ethan, you can't just invent rules," he scolded, narrowing his eyes. "Sure, I can," I said, moving my pawn 3 extra spaces. "It's called creative strategy." He groaned, but when I started making up dramatic announcer voices for every turn, even he cracked up. The game devolved into laughter and accusations of cheating until neither of us cared who won. Later, bundled in coats and scarves, we ventured outside to tackle the snow. It was knee-deep, blindingly white, and begging to be turned into something ridiculous. Daniel started rolling a perfect symmetrical snowball, his engineer's brain clearly at work. I naturally made mine lumpy and slightly tragic. "You call that a snowman?" he teased, eyebrows raised. "Abstract art," I said proudly, sticking a twig at a questionable angle. When we finally stood back, our snowman looked more like a snow creature. But we high-fived anyway, laughing so hard we both fell backward into the drifts. I lay there, cheeks frozen but chest warm, staring up at the gray sky and thought, This is what I wanted. Dinner was an adventure of its own. Ramen noodles dressed up with every spice we could find, canned beans, and half a bag of stale tortilla chips we pretended were gourmet. We ate on the floor in front of the fireplace, bowls steaming in our hands, and toasted with mugs of lukewarm cocoa. Then, when the fire burned low, music filled the silence. Just some scratchy old radio station, barely clear enough to make out the melody. I stood, offered my hand with a grin. "Dance with me." Daniel hesitated. "There's no room. There's always room." And somehow, there was. We swayed clumsily in front of the fire, blankets draped around our shoulders, our feet knocking together. Daniel held me tighter than he had in weeks, his chin resting against my hair. For once, there were no arguments, no lists, no fears, just the rhythm of us, slow and steady. At some point, I tilted my face up and his lips found mine. Soft, tentative at first, then deeper, like he was memorizing me all over again. The kiss wasn't desperate, it was grounding. It whispered, "I'm still here, we're still us." Later, tangled together under the heap of blankets by the fire, we whispered promises. Not of perfection, not of forever without flaws. Just simple, fragile vows. To listen more, to laugh more, to try again. I fell asleep in Daniel's arms, his heartbeat steady under my ear. And for the first time since he'd said the word divorce, I believed we might actually make it. Day 7 of our honeymoon, aka our second beginning. The rumble hit me first, low and steady, shaking the cabin walls like distant thunder. Daniel sat up from where he'd been packing the last of our things into a bag, brows furrowed. "Snowplows," he said. And sure enough, moments later, the flashing orange lights cut through the curtain of white outside. The storm had broken. Our week of isolation was over. I pressed my face to the frosted glass, heart twisting. Relief, yes, but something else too. The cabin had been our prison, our battlefield, but also the place where, against all odds, we'd found our way back to each other. "You're smiling," Daniel murmured behind me. I turned, grinning sheepishly, just thinking, maybe the storm wasn't all bad. His lips quirked, that rare soft smile that always undid me. It was the worst week of my life. And the best I stepped closer, brushing my fingers against his. "So, what are we walking out as? Ex-husbands, roommates, or?" He took my hand firmly, like he was sealing something that had been fragile for too long. "Or the same idiots who fell in love too fast. But this time, we'll do the work to keep it." Tears pricked hot in my eyes. That sounds like us. Outside, the snowplow finished its final sweep, leaving a narrow path of grayish slush toward the road. Daniel slung our bags over his shoulder, and we stepped onto the porch together. The air was sharp, biting, but clean. Like the storm had washed everything raw and left only what mattered. I glanced at Daniel, at the man who'd scared me, infuriated me, broken me, and then, against all odds, held me together again. "You know," I said lightly, "most people don't count a snowed-in, almost divorce as their honeymoon highlight." He chuckled, shaking his head. "We're not most people." We reached the shoveled path, standing side by side, our boots crunching in the fresh snow. For a heartbeat, the whole world felt still, like it was waiting to see what we'd choose. Daniel leaned down, pressing his forehead to mine. his voice barely more than a whisper. Let's start over, Ethan. Not perfect husbands, just partners, lovers, us. My throat tightened, but I managed a shaky laugh. Partners in crime, lovers in chaos. That's us. His lips brushed mine, soft and certain, sealing the promise not in words but in warmth. And as the snowplow's engine roared in the distance, I realized we weren't leaving as the couple who came here. We weren't leaving broken or bitter or done. We were leaving as something scarier and stronger. Lovers who knew just how close they'd come to losing each other, and who were finally ready to fight for it. The next day. The moment we stepped back into our apartment, it felt strange. Like slipping into old shoes that still fit but pinched in new places. The familiar smell of coffee beans from the jar on the counter. The uneven leg on the couch we'd promised to fix 2 years ago. The framed photo from our wedding, slightly crooked on the wall. I glanced at Daniel, wondering if he felt it too. The shift. The question in the air. Would we slide back into the cracks that nearly broke us? Or build something different this time? He set our bags down and cleared his throat. Okay, he said, tugging at his sleeve like he was nervous. There's something I want to try. That usually meant spreadsheets. Sure enough, he pulled his laptop from its case. I groaned. We've been home for 15 minutes. You can't even let me order takeout before unleashing an Excel monster? But instead of snapping back, Daniel smiled. Awkward, but real. I want to go over our budget. Together. I've been making decisions without asking you, and I don't want to keep doing that. That one word, together, caught me off guard. He wasn't dictating. He was inviting. I plopped down beside him on the couch, peering at the screen. Fine. But if you try to cancel my comic subscription again, I'm leaving you for real this time. Daniel laughed, the tension easing. Noted. Comics stay. But maybe we can cut back on ordering takeout 3 nights a week? I leaned against him, pretending to think it over. I'll allow it, but only if you agree to try cooking with me again. I'm not doing solo kitchen duty deal. And just like that, something that used to spiral into a fight turned into a negotiation, a compromise, progress. 2 nights later. Daniel came home with grocery bags in one hand and a mysterious twinkle in his eyes. What's this? I asked, trying to peek inside. He smirked. Surprise date night. You're banned from the kitchen until I say so. I raised my brows. You? Planning a date? Voluntarily? He shrugged, a little bashful. You said you wanted me to take this marriage seriously. So here I am, my heart did a ridiculous flip. An hour later, I was seated at our tiny dining table, candles flickering in mismatched holders, music low on the speaker. Daniel served up something that looked halfway between pasta and a science experiment, but it was steaming, and it smelled good. Bon appétit, he said with mock formality. I grinned. If I die from this, just know I forgive you. But the pasta was edible. Good, even. And more than that, it was effort. He'd listened. He'd shown up. Halfway through dinner, though, the spell cracked. You know, he said carefully, I've been thinking about working longer hours. It might help us save for the house faster. And there it was, the old thorn. Work versus us. Responsibility versus time together. My gut reaction bubbled up. Here we go again. But instead of lashing out, I set my fork down. Okay, but if you're working more, where? Does that leave us? You can't just disappear into spreadsheets in 12-hour days. His jaw tightened. I'm not disappearing. I'm trying to build us a future. I leaned forward. I don't need a bigger house if it means I barely see you in it. The silence was sharp. Old habits itched at me. Slam a wall down, make a joke, deflect. But then I remembered the cabin, the firelight, the promises whispered through tears. So I reached across the table, covering his hand with mine. Look, I'm not saying no. I'm saying, let's figure out how to do this without losing what we just found. Together, Daniel exhaled, shoulders loosening. You're right. I don't want to go back to the way we were, so maybe I'll try the extra hours for a while, but we'll schedule actual time. Date nights, even if it's just cheap pasta at this table. Something in me unclenched. That works. As long as you don't replace me with Excel, he chuckled, threading our fingers. Never. Later that night, dishes piled in the sink and candle wax cooling on the table, we curled up on the couch. No storm howling outside this time, just the hum of the fridge and the quiet thrum of his heartbeat under my cheek. It wasn't perfect. It wouldn't ever be. But it was us. Messy, trying, stumbling, and choosing each other anyway. And for the first time in a long time, that felt like enough. A few weeks later. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon when Daniel suggested it. No grand gesture, no sweeping music, just the two of us folding laundry in the living room. He held up one of my ridiculous graphic tees, gave me that look, the one that's half exasperation, half fondness, and said, you know, maybe we should revisit our vows. At first, I laughed, thinking he was joking. But then I saw the way his eyes softened, the nervous way he smoothed the shirt before placing it on the couch. He meant it. So here we were, sitting cross-legged on the rug, a pair of notebooks and a couple of pens between us. No tuxes, no audience, no aisle. Just us. I went first. My voice shook, but I didn't hide it. Daniel, I don't promise perfection anymore. I don't promise to always agree with you or never screw up. What I promise is to keep showing up even when it's hard. To laugh with you, to fight with you, to find my way back to you no matter what. I don't want a divorce. I just want you, flaws and all. The words hung there, simple but truer than anything I'd said the first time we stood at an altar. Daniel's throat worked as he swallowed. Then he opened his notebook. His voice was low, steady, but his eyes glistened. Ethan, I used to think love meant control, safety, making sure everything stayed in order. But I've learned that loving you means letting go, letting myself breathe, laugh, take risks. You're not reckless. You're the reason I remember life is more than checklists. I don't want perfect. I want you, just as you are. I didn't even realize I was crying until he reached out, thumb brushing the tear from my cheek. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The world shrank to this little circle of lamplight and folded clothes and promises reborn. Then I leaned forward, pressing my forehead against his. So, no annulment? I whispered, the joke breaking through the lump in my throat. He chuckled, shaky but real. Not a chance. Our lips met, soft, lingering, nothing urgent. Just the quiet kind of kiss that says we made it. When we finally pulled back, Daniel exhaled, like he'd been holding the world in his chest and could finally set it down. And me? I just smiled, because for once I wasn't afraid. We'd chosen each other again. Not in front of a crowd, not in the middle of some picture-perfect ceremony, but here, on the rug, amid laundry and mismatched socks. Imperfect, real, ours. And that was the only vow I'd ever need. The end. Have you ever been stuck in a situation like Ethan and Daniel? Thanks for watching. Subscribe to become part of our Rainbow Force, and consider joining our membership for early access and exclusive content. Stay wholesome.